Welcome back, Gadgeteers. Today we're going to talk about a topic that is interesting to me and I think you'll find interesting. So it seems like whenever I do a Linux video, invariably I get some comment somewhere saying, you need to stop using the command line so much. Please show us how to do it without using the command line. Here's the thing. There is an operating system already out there where you don't have to use the command line. Actually, there's two of them. There's Mac OS and there's Windows. So if you're absolutely opposed to the command line, I recommend checking those out. And I'm not trying to be mean or facetious in any way. I'm being serious. If you want to get to know Linux, you should know at least a little bit of the command line. Now, in a recent video I posted, I did do an update using DNF, which is a command line tool that you use to update your computer. It's pretty straightforward. All you have to do is type in sudo dnf update and press enter. It'll ask you for your password, and you type in your password. And it's going to go out and check and see how many updates are out there. And you can see we have 892 megabytes of updates. Now I know if I were to go ahead and do these updates using the command line, it would be fine. It would go over really well. So it would probably take it, I'm thinking maybe 30 minutes to do the update. But everybody wants to see the GUI, and I'm going to show that to you right now. So the first thing I want to point out is that you get more information when you use the command line, okay? Case in point, we have 386 packages here that'll be upgraded and 12 that'll be installed. Our total download size is 892 megabytes. So I'm going to click no, say don't do, whoops, try again. Don't do the update. So we're not going to do it with the command line. We're going to go ahead to the graphical interface. So I click this little link here, and it shows I have 399 updates. I'm going to click select all packages. Okay. And then, whoops, it was already selected. My mistake. It's so tiny you can't hardly tell. Then I'm going to click Install Updates. Now, I'm not saying the GUI is a bad thing. It certainly works well. In previous versions of KDE Plasma, I have had problems with updates. So you can see at first anyway, it didn't ask me to log in. So I didn't have to become root or use sudo as I did with the command line. So that's a plus. So it's 5:20 now. Let's see how long this takes us. I'm tempted to run the video as long as the updates run. That way you can get a sense of how long it takes to do updates via the GUI versus the command line. Now, downloading is going to be the same no matter if it's the graphical system or doing it via the command line. It's basically the same. So here's the thing. You're using a tool. That's all the command line is. Now, if you've watched my videos, you know that I don't throw commands at you that are way overboard. I do make an assumption that I have a wide audience base. I have those that thoroughly understand the command line and are confident with it, and those that have never used the command line and don't feel confident with it. So when I put different commands that I use, I try to make them some of the simpler commands that I'm fairly certain will not cause a problem. Now, it does depend on which Linux distribution you use, but the whole point here is I'm trying to offer up commands that would be faster for you than it would be to do in the graphical interface, or unfortunately you can't do in the graphical interface. That's the bottom line. And that's why I say if you want a GUI that doesn't force you to use the command line, we've got two of them out there, Mac OS or Windows. Choose one of those. If you enjoy using the GUI in Linux, that's great. I say more power to you, get to know it, but at some point you're going to have to use the command line. Now, we just got an error on the updates, and I'm not sure what it was. I noticed I am missing my Wi-Fi connection now. So here's the error I got. And I don't see... No, I am connected. Okay. Well, we're going to just go over here. I know. I'm going to the command line. Well, if you want, let's pretend I don't know anything about the command line. Okay. So, are we still connected? Yes, we're still connected. Okay, so I got an error. Let's go back. Select all packages. Whoops, they're already selected, remember? And install updates. So I have a repository that I'm using called Livna, and it looks like Livna may be causing a problem. I can't be sure. So let's try again. So it's trying to install libDVD CSS update, and for some reason it's not able to. So I'm going to unselect this one. Again, I can't really tell if it's unselected or selected. The buttons are so tiny. And I'm going to do install updates again. We're going to try again. Now, my thinking is, even though this was a problem with libDVD CSS, I don't think it would have mattered if it was the GUI or the command line. And we can test that after this gets done. We can try to do an update of libDVD CSS with the command line and see what happens. Anyway, back to my rant. So I think it's wonderful if you want to get to know Linux, and I wouldn't discourage you from doing that, but you can't get too deep into Linux. You can use Linux, there's no doubt, but you can't get too deep into Linux without using the command line at some point. And I'm not saying it's going to be those long, drawn-out, difficult commands, but as an example, what if you want to install the NVIDIA or Radeon drivers for your video card? So, you know, you really... Okay, I guess you could do it with the command line. It's technically possible, but it is way more difficult. It really is easier to use the terminal and do it that way. So at some point, you're going to have to do it. So all the packages have been downloaded. They're now actually doing the install. We're about 6 minutes in. We had about a minute there where we had to do a little bit of work to get things going. Wasn't too difficult. I just deselected the package that was causing the problem and continued on my merry way. So far so good. So we're at about 49% now. Not too bad. My experience has been if you're using the command line, it's always going to be faster than the GUI no matter what. However, it looks like the GUI system that's being used now. Now, just so you understand, we're talking about depth. So if you're using Linux and you don't use the command line, you won't understand the depth of Linux. Well, right now the GUI is doing the installation, but it's actually using DNF under the hood to actually complete the installation. So we're at about 55%, not too bad. You can rely on the GUI in this instance for doing updates, but it's the other things that I'm thinking you're probably going to need at some point to get into terminal. There's not a whole lot that I do unless, just like everybody else, I'm in the position where I have to find something out. It's just that there's so many commands that make things so much easier, in my opinion. And I really do think that it's good to get to know it at least a little bit, even if you're just doing updates or you're blocking packages to be updated or you're changing the kernel you want to use, things like that. So let's get a look-see and find out what's being used. So we're going to run system monitor. I'll just stick that up there. If I want to see those updates again, I can just click the button here for updates and I can see the progress. So we're using about 18-19% of the processor. Of course, I am also rendering, so that's probably the majority of what we're seeing. Yeah, OBS 8 to 12%. And package kit D about 1%. So really not hitting the processor all that much, or memory for that matter. Let's look back here again. No, not even a third of a gig, about 300 megabytes. And what's our progress? Okay, so we're cleaning up now. About 10 minutes in. So again, I'm not saying that if you're on Linux, you must use the command line, but I am saying that at some point, you're probably going to need it in order to be able to do something on your system, especially when something breaks. And that's unfortunate with Linux. I'm going to agree with that. You have to be more willing to get under the hood and do things, directly with the command line than you will in Windows or Mac OS, certainly. So if you like those two operating systems and you just want to dabble in Linux, go for it, even if you don't want to use the command line. And it does show some maturity of the operating system to have that expectation where you can sit there and do things without having to go to the command line every time. Okay. So all the updates are done. We do have one new update. I'm going to try, this was the one that failed. I'm going to go ahead and try and install it again. Let's see what happens. Okay, no. And of course, see here it says you have 399 new updates. We really don't. So let's go to the command line, sudo dnf update, and see if we get the same error. There's a good chance that we will. So it's going to do a check. It sees one update. I see. The only problem really is it wants to import a GPG key. And what is that all about? Well, it's just a specific fingerprint and ID for the repository. Interesting that the GPG check failed. So that's not a problem of the GUI. That's a problem of the installer in general. So it wants to install a GPG key, which should be okay. I'm not sure why that's a problem. My knee-jerk reaction here is, let's change the directory and go to the RPM GPG folder. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and do it. This is my point about something went wrong, okay? And first thing I'm going to do is become root. And change directory etc pki rpm-gpg. We got a ton of keys in here, so let's do an ls and grep on livna. My thinking is, October 25th, 2008. That this key is really old and it's causing a problem with my import of the new key. Well, I'm going to take the plunge here, and I think what I'll do is move the RPM gpg-key-livna to same name .old. So now if I run that command I ran previously, so this command basically is doing a listing of all hidden and all files in a list showing the names, and it's grepping on or grabbing anything with livna in it. So we only had one, and I've renamed it .old. So let's try to do that DNF update again and see if it'll install the key this time. No, it wants that key there no matter what. Now you see why I didn't delete the key. So it's always nice to be able to try something, but you really don't want to delete a file unless you're absolutely sure you want that file deleted. So all I have to do is go back to my move command and type .old, whoops, here, and return the name of the key back to its original name. And I'm just going to check and see if I get the same error message I got before. Yes, GPG check failed. All right. Well, I couldn't get DNF and Live DVD CSS, the package I was trying to install, to play nice. So I did something that I want to show you. And basically what I did was ran this command here. Let me make it a little bit bigger. So I did the usual DNF update. I added the -y because I wanted the update to just go ahead and run without me having to prompt it. And I have used this before. It is a command line switch called no GPG, and basically what it does is it prevents a check on the key. So what's the problem when you do that? Well, if you use no GPG, you are assuming that the packages that you received are legitimately from the repository source that you got them from. In other words, you don't have that guaranteed signed key pair, public-private pair, where you know these packages came specifically from the repository. If I was running a server and I was downloading multiple packages from a repository, I definitely would not want to use the no GPG. Because it was only one package from one repository, Livna, I felt it wasn't that big of a deal. I already have it installed, it just did an update. But here's the thing. Let me show you some of the stuff I tried. So if I type out the history command and press enter, here are, let's go starting, these are only a couple. Let me grab my other command line and do a history. So you can see that I've been trying to get this working for a while now, and the thing is, when you encounter a problem, you have to resort to the command line. You don't have to like it, but you have to do it. So if it had been the first time I was trying to get that package and the graphical interface didn't work, well, that's that. It gives you the error message to tell you what you need to do, but if you're not willing to go into the command line, you won't be able to play DVDs and CD. Well, CDs, yes, you can play, but you wouldn't be able to play DVDs in your Linux system. So this problem, pops up, and it kind of cements my point here. You have to feel comfortable to some extent in the command line. You don't have to be perfect at it, but you do have to have at least some understanding of what you're doing. And sometimes, you get a situation where a problem presents itself and you don't know what to do in the command line, and that's okay. You know, you can seek help online or from somebody that that knows Linux, or maybe post your own request online and say, hey, I'm having this problem and I can't get this to work. What do you recommend? But if you want to be a part of Linux eventually, you're going to end up using the command line. And when I showcase it, I try to do it in such a way that you could run these commands and would feel confident that doing so would not hurt you. And in the case of this one, I did the no GPG. I feel confident that that one repository libna is okay, and I don't need the key to know that I'm getting it from the right source because it's only one package and I feel confident it's okay. But if it was a different one, I might say, no, you're going to have to fix that problem one way or the other. And it could be some work. And once the problem presents itself, you're not going to be able to do it in the graphical user interface. So I'm going to keep showing you command line stuff, like it or lump it, because I think you need to know. So try not to get too mad when I put command line stuff up and say, do this in the terminal, because it'll help you get a start. And I'll try not to get too in-depth unless I absolutely have to, but it is something that is good for you to know. Anyway, I think that about wraps it up. I think it's interesting that this problem presented itself right when I'm showing you how to use the GUI, and you can see how quickly you're having to jump into the command line. So I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Fast Gadgets. This video was made possible with support from viewers like you. If you find this video useful, consider becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/FastGadgets.